Hello all, it's the 17th of February 2018. You're here with Dan in Essex, UK. Beautiful day today, lovely blue sky. Had frosts the last 2 nights, but that's normal for this time of year in the UK. And it almost feels spring-like today, and it is rather warm in the sun, so that's a great thing. Now, if you've been following my channel, you may remember a few days ago that I uploaded a video with regards to tree grafting. Now, I've done some tree grafting in the past, and I've got a playlist on that should you be interested. Now, this tree here is apple variety Winter King, and I uploaded a video on this shortly, or the year or so after I grafted it, and it's one of the first YouTube videos that I uploaded, so you might want to have a look at that to see, just how insignificant looking it looked just a year or so after I grafted it, but it really has grown well. It's probably about 2.5 to 3 feet tall at the moment, and quite a strong tree actually. It's doing quite well. Now, MM106, what that is, that's a rootstock, otherwise known as a half standard, so it should be a fair sized tree one day. But a little bit of experimentation on my part when I grafted this. So what I did was I left the rootstock relatively small before I grafted it, and the rootstock I purchased from Blackmore Nurseries. So if you're interested in getting rootstocks for grafting, I would recommend Blackmore Nursery. Good price and good quality as well, and they deliver straight to your door. So have a look at them on their website. Just put Blackmore Nursery into Google or something like that, and it should indeed come up. Of course, there are other places that you can get them from as well. But apple variety Winter King, now it's a long keeping variety, hence the name Winter King, and if they're kept properly, the apples, they can last up until March, April the following year. So that's a great thing. If you get a good crop and you can keep them well and you're still eating them 6 months or so, or 5 months after you've picked them, that's a good thing. And of course, in the days before apple imports into the UK, etc., and refrigeration, cold storing, it was a very important variety because, of course, once all the quick keepers, if you want to call them that, were gone, you would be looking for something else that you could eat. So yeah. Now, the other name, Winston, comes from the World War II Prime Minister Winston Churchill, so there is a little bit of interest attached to this variety, and I would recommend people grow it if they want a long-keeping apple. Of course, looking at this tree now, it doesn't look much, simply because the leaves are off, but it's the dormant season, so you would expect that. So let's have a look at the tree. Okay, so you can see the buds, etc, etc. Now, looking at the rootstock, now I spoke a bit about rootstocks before, and one of the advantages of grafting onto a rootstock is you can control, or help to control, the eventual size of the tree, because of course, if your intention is to grow a very small tree, you don't want to graft it onto a vigorous rootstock, because more than likely one day it will be a massive tree in a place that you don't want. Obviously, if you're planting a tree, you intend to grow it within a pot, then you don't want it on a vigorous rootstock. So have a look down here. Now, you can see this was the rootstock, is indeed the rootstock here, and I made the graft here. What I did was I cut it down there and grafted the scion into it, which came from Stephen Hayes on the Fruitwise YouTube channel, so I spoke about that, check that one out. And I'll just show you around here like that. And what I'll probably do in a few weeks or months, I'll probably do another graft of a similar style and show you how I did this. And the reason why I'm showing you this is because it might give you a little bit of encouragement to just give it a go. Because I'm quite satisfied with this. It's a tree I grafted myself, and from a scion like this and a rootstock like this, all of this tree has grown and come from it. And I think last year I had probably about 10 to 15 apples off of it, and for a tree this size I don't think that is that bad. And you can see the growth that it's put out. I think probably where my thumb is here to here, this was probably last year's growth, so I'm expecting a better crop year on year from this tree. we'll just go and have a look, a perusal around it, so you can have a look. And of course, once this has got a bit more growth going to it, a bit bigger, I'll probably prune it into a shape. So this is one. We'll just have a look at the rootstock again so you can have a look. As I stated before, I did a form of cleft graft, and it really has fattened up. This scion was probably about half as thick as this when I grafted it, and the sort of not trunks, but the stems, if you will, coming off of it, or branches, are starting to thicken up and feel a lot more solid. So all in all, I'm very happy with this tree. And with regards to thinking of grafting your own trees and setting up a backyard orchard, if that's what your intention is, you want to think about the varieties that you want to continue on and that you like to eat, of course. So Winter King, of course, if you want a long keeping one. So what you could think of, if you were going to try to graft 3 trees, you could think of an early, a mid-season and a late variety. Do your research and have a look. And I think it's nice to have apples throughout the season, because if you've got an early one, yeah, you'll get them early, great, but then they'll be gone and you'll think, well, what next? But with a little bit of preparation, and there's also methods in which you can employ in order to graft different varieties onto one tree. I'm sure if you look at some of the major websites, etc., on tree growing, you'll be able to see trees that have got more than one variety on. This has got obviously more than one advantage. The one advantage, of course, that I spoke about is apples over a sustained period, and another advantage is you can have varieties flowering at the same time in order to help with pollination with apples that don't necessarily produce that well, if indeed at all, on their own pollen. So there's many good reasons to learn about grafting. Just listening to them birds singing. Okay, so this is another one that may interest you, and I grafted this using the same cleft graft style, probably about the same time as the Winter King, or maybe a year or so after, but I'm very happy with how this has turned out. So you can see where my finger is here, this was the scion, once again, from Blackmore Nursery, and sorry, not the scion, the rootstock, and the scion here, which once again came from Stephen Hayes. And we've got the main, if you want to call it a trunk, if it's worthy of that yet, but scion ended there, and you can see all this growth that it's slowly put out up to there. So I grafted it like this because I wanted to have a style of a cordon. So check out cordons if you're interested. Cordons are a great way of growing apples and fruits, etc., if you have limited space. Like you can see up against this very warm, in fact you really can feel the warmth now, up against this south facing fence. Now what I did the following year, I believe it was I grafted another variety onto it down here. Now this is apple variety, you probably guessed now it's one of my favourites, Winter King, and it's grown onto here. You can see that there, look, you can see a bit of grafting tape left. If I just try to get the camera here a bit closer, I hope you can see this. I'm sorry if my camera work's not that great. But down there, look, and you can see that was the scion there, or is the scion, and this growth here is where it's later grown on. So we've got Lord Lambourne, I believe it was here, UK variety, and Winter King, and off of the Lord Lambourne another stem came off here, so this can be trained or something along those lines. Now this was another one that I did. Now this again shows a little bit of ingenuity on my part, and now what I did was I did this a few years ago, and ingenuity, that's the wrong term, sorry, experimentation, and I did one here again. And this was during a very busy period of my life, so didn't necessarily look after these as well as I should have. But now take a look, this here was a graft here, And as I was learning, I remember I kept cutting the scion wrong. And as that happened, it got shorter and shorter and shorter until it was about like that. I thought, what the hey? And I carried on with it. So I put that in with the cleft graft again, and believe it or not, it took. I believe this is Egremont Russett. So up here, look, finger there, all the way up there, all that growth. So I'm really happy. And then the rootstock put out some growth within following years, and I grafted another variety onto there, look, and that took. This one didn't take, as you can see, that's a failure. So 2 out of 3 isn't bad. So there's like grafting, you can experiment with it, and you can, you know, just have a go really. It's just one of them things that you know, you want to have it as a string to your bow if you can, because it's just interesting, I find. And you could say it could potentially save you some money, I suppose. I mean, if you bought some rootstocks from, you know, Blackmore or somewhere like that, and you managed to graft them into good trees that would one day have, well, would cost you, say, 20 to 30 to 40 pounds new, and you managed to graft it for the cost of a rootstock and a few, you know, scions, maybe 3 scions, you know, you could look at it as a long-term money saver. So many benefits to grafting, but one of them things that if you want to go sort of to the